Ladies and gentlemen, we have some massive news to cover today as the Democrats' mail-in ballot cheating apparatus has been dealt a fatal blow, and up to 27 million mail-in ballots may be out of play for the 2026 midterms as a result of this breaking news. As a result of an executive order signed by President Trump back in March of this year, the United States Postmaster General just said yesterday on Capitol Hill that the USPS will not deliver mail-in ballots to states that have not turned in their voter lists.
If a state refuses to turn their absentee voter list over to the federal government, will the Postal Service still mail their ballots under this proposal route?
Under our proposed regulation, no. We would tell the state that we need the manifest in order to.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you can imagine the Democrat political machine is in a full-blown panic as this news has sent shockwaves to the 27 or more states that are refusing to comply with the DOJ. You know, there's been an ongoing fight with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice over the individual states' voter rolls. They've been battling it out in court for months, and these states will not hand over the data to the federal government because they know full well that their voter rolls are filled with non-citizens, dead people, people that have moved away, and if the federal government ever got their hands on it and cross-checked it with federal databases, they would see that non-citizens are in fact casting ballots in federal elections, and they cannot afford to share this data with the feds. Well, as per Trump's executive order that was issued on March 31st, 2026, titled Ensuring Citizenship Verification and Integrity in Federal Elections, the United States Postal Service is prohibited from issuing mail-in ballots to states that have not turned over their state list. So these blue states, they are faced with an ultimatum: hand over the data, clean the voter rolls, or lose your mail-in ballot pipeline. And this is absolutely massive, as the Democracy Center says that 1 in 3 white voters cast ballots by mail in 2024, totaling over 27 million votes. Now, this was a presidential election, and we're talking about the upcoming midterms, so who knows what the number actually is, but we know we're talking in the millions. Millions of ballots are thrown into question now. However, ladies and gentlemen, there's one little problem, and that is the fact that our country is filled with a bunch of radical left progressive judges. And just as this news broke, we discover that a leftist judge by the name of Denise Casper, who was appointed by Obama, of course, has unilaterally struck down President Trump's requirement for proof of citizenship and voter ID in elections nationwide. I mean, it literally came down the pipeline simultaneously. The moment that the Postmaster General announced that we would not be sending mail-in ballots to these states. However, I want to make the case for why Trump is likely to win on appeal, and that this executive order has a very, very good chance of being in effect come the 2026 midterms, at the very least by the 2028 election cycle. The Trump administration is already working on an appeal for this decision, and the chances are this is going up to the Supreme Court. Okay, it's probably not going to win its first appeal at the First Circuit, but chances are this is going to the Supreme Court because it challenges, and we've seen on countless occasions, challenges to Trump's executive authority as it pertains to elections. I mean, really, this is a matter of national importance, and I believe it will be expedited to the Supreme Court given the fact that we have an upcoming election. And we have this big constitutional clash between the states and these radical left judges on the lower courts and the appeals courts, and Trump and his executive authority. See, what keeps happening is whenever Trump issues an executive order, or when the Department of Justice tries to get a hold of the voter rolls of these individual states, a group of activists, blue state attorney generals, civil rights groups, they all gang up and they file suit in the lower courts. And they say that it's federal overreach because in the Constitution, it actually says that the legislature shall set the time, place, and manner for how elections are conducted, or something like that. And so the way that it gets interpreted by these radical left Marxist judges appointed by Obama and Joe Biden is that the federal government has absolutely no constitutional right or authority to do anything related to how states conduct their elections, because they say it's federal overreach. And so it gets shut down by these lower courts on the basis of, separation of powers. But here's the problem, and here's why everything is working in Trump's favor when this gets to the Supreme Court. See, the Constitution also says that the president shall take care that all laws are faithfully executed. And so if he sees that existing federal law is being broken by these states, then it is his duty, his constitutional duty, to do something about it. And we have multiple federal laws relating to elections on the books already, which is why the DOJ has absolute constitutional authority and jurisdiction to audit the state's voter rolls. If that ever gets to the Supreme Court, it will be an absolute slam dunk. It is 100% within their right to check and make sure that federal laws are being complied with, but we haven't got to the Supreme Court yet. Well, when we do, I guarantee you, the Supreme Court will side with the Department of Justice. Now, as we're talking about this executive order over mail-in ballots. In Trump's executive order, nowhere does he create a new law that didn't exist already. All the executive order does is it directs the executive branch of the government to issue safeguards and security protocols to make sure that the laws are not broken, the existing laws. And so here's the deal. This executive order, which has already been shut down by a radical Obama-appointed judge, is going to go to the Supreme Court. It's almost guaranteed. It'll go to the First Circuit first, and there's not so good of a chance that they'll win there. But it is going to get expedited to the Supreme Court. Election cases get fast-tracked to the Supreme Court because they understand the national importance, and it has to be dealt with in a timely manner. And then what's most likely going to happen is that we don't have to wait for this to get litigated. It's so simple, so cut and dry, that a stay, an injunction, could be put in place before the 2026 midterms, which means that the executive order will be put into effect while this makes its way through the Supreme Court. Now, I can't guarantee anything, but that seems like the most likely scenario, given the fact that this constitutional clash keeps happening at the lower courts. Eventually, the Supreme Court is going to be forced to issue a ruling, an opinion that sets a precedent going forward. And the reality is, it is Trump's attempt to faithfully execute the laws that already exist. It is already illegal for non-citizens to cast ballots in federal elections. And this executive order simply mandates that the states comply with that law. And the states that are fighting against it, well, you have to ask yourself, why? Why would they fight against transparency, accuracy, and safety and security in elections unless they were completely reliant and dependent on fraud to get elected? I mean, that's really the only thing that explains their behavior. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, there's a good chance that millions of ballots will be thrown into question come the 2026 midterms, if not by the 2028 presidential election cycle. And you know damn well that the Democrat machine is in full-blown panic right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is incredible and very interesting, so I wanted to give you the news. And for that, ladies and gentlemen, if you could, leave a like and subscribe, turn the bell notifications on. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.